Welcome everyone to another CTC software webinar. My name is Sean Zerbis, Technical Evangelist at CTC, and today I want to bring to you, in collaboration with APAL, our Australian partner, a demonstration or a comprehensive introduction to our BIM Manager Suite. Reminder to all, as always, our webinars are recorded, so if you want to come back and review this later, by all means, please come back and review this later. If you wanted to invite other people who weren't able to attend today, you can share this with them once it gets uploaded to our YouTube channel. But, and also, while we're going through this webinar today, if you have questions, feel free, please, to throw them in the questions window, and I will do my best to answer them live in line. And if, for any reason I can't answer them in line, I will definitely answer all questions at the end of the webinar as well. So feel free to throw questions in there. All right, let's take a look at what we're going to kind of investigate today, which is the BIM Manager Suite. So the BIM Manager Suite is really a collection of incredibly powerful tools. They really are designed for BIM managers, not necessarily everyday Revit users. They're designed for BIM managers to help you as BIM managers improve your efficiency, your accuracy of tasks, how deep you can dig into BIM management tasks, and how quickly you can get it done. These are intended to be intuitive interfaces, and if you feel that's not the case, let us know, because we always design based on your input. So give us feedback on this, but they're intuitive interfaces and workflow-based processes. And these processes really can eliminate a lot of hours of tedious BIM management. I'm going to give some examples of that later on for you, so you can kind of see some actual ROI numbers or understand some ROI numbers on this. I'm going to discuss a couple of these workflows, not all of the workflows, but two major workflows for sure. And I'm going to demonstrate some of the key tools inside of here, because I want you to understand how you can leverage these tools in your firm to gain ROI today, right away. I'm going to go over a couple of major things. I'm going to talk about the basic functionalities I mentioned. I'm going to describe the functionality, describe some of the workflows, and demonstrate some of the tools. I'm certainly going to cover and demonstrate some of the most popular tools within here that are related to some of those workflows. I want to talk a bit about how you can get started with this suite. I'm going to talk about installation and deployment options, and a part of that is I want to show you exactly how you can get your hands on this suite if you don't already have it. If you do, hopefully you're going to learn something new today as something you can do that's, great and new usable workflows and whatnot. But if you don't already have it, I'm going to show you how you can get it, how you can try it out. Since I'm not big on death by PowerPoint, let's just go in live and take a look at this in the Revit environment, and we'll talk about the tools right there. So in Revit, when you install the suite of tools, it'll be on the CTC software tab here at the top, and I'm already there. I'm already on the CTC software tab. And the suite that we're talking about today is the BIM Manager Suite. I'm going to pull it off the ribbon for a minute here so we can kind of see this isolated on screen. It's all of the tools in blue. One of the tools is grayed out because it only works in the family environment, and I'll talk about that in a minute here. But all these tools in blue. Those that are light-colored tools, they're actually free. So if you want to use them right now today, go for it. Download the suite, install it, try using them. These tools will never die. They will continue to work forever. When you do download this, when I show you at the end how to download these and try them out, some of these tools, the darker colored icons, they're licensed tools. They all license in the same suite. And when you get them licensed, they will work for your license duration. But during the trial time, it works for 14 days. 14 days, pretty much fully functional. And then after 14 days, they stop working, but the free tools, they continue on. And there's a really valuable tool in here that I use all the time. And hopefully you also will find some value in that tool. We'll find out. So the Manager Suite, I find, helps out pretty much all BIM managers. Doesn't matter what type of models you work on, what type of projects your company does, whether you're architecture, or MEP, or structural, or interiors, it doesn't matter, because we all run into sort of the same problems as BIM managers, and we all have to try to fix these problems, and we need tools to help us efficiently do that. And there's two primary areas where I leverage these tools. Two workflows I'm going to talk about is project cleanup and family library cleanup. Now, usually it's a good idea to do family library cleanup first. That's ideal. But when stuff starts to hit fans, when things go sideways, and you have to like answer project crashing problems or just slow projects problems, then usually the project workflow is the one that most people are usually most interested in straight away. So we're going to talk about that first. We're going to talk about the project workflow first. There are 4 tools that I almost always use in project cleanup or investigating projects. And there are 4 tools on this suite that I almost always use when I'm doing family library work. And I'll talk about those 8 tools. Now, this suite has more than 8 tools, but I'm going to talk about those 8 today, and I'll kind of cover what the other tools do as well. So let me just kind of quickly run through this. Family Preview Manager is a free tool that allows you to set family previews on your families. And you can set them based on rules. You can run through an entire library and update all the previews of all your families to a specific rule set based on category of the family and based on hosting type. So if you've got a door that is wall hosted, it can have a different preview than a door that is roof hosted or a door that is ceiling hosted for an access panel. So you can go through and control those previews how you like. You got an air terminal that's face-based or an air terminal that's ceiling-based. You might want 2 different previews because one faces one direction, one faces a different direction. You might want to do different preview setups for those. So you can do that. There's a lot of fun you can do with this tool. I like using this as sort of a closing tool for my family cleanup process if I really want nice previews. Family Tools is a great tool here that allows you to go through and just do some basic menial things. Check versions of a whole collection of families, delete all the backups and directories and subdirectories, do some really kind of remedial shared parameter comparison and mashing together type stuff. It's a free collection that lets you do some nice things. Really, I use it primarily for backup deletion. And when I'm doing a lot of lookup table and type catalog work, this helps me with the creation of my type catalogs from Excel files. When I do that CSV conversion to text file, this has a cute little tool and it helps me with that. It's a small little tool set, saves me a little bit of time. Project Cleaner. Now, this is one of the tools I'm going to talk about in that project workflow. This tool allows you the ability to very easily discover views that are not placed on sheets that have no dependents and delete them. And also, before sending projects out of house, some people like to deep clean those projects and only deliver certain views, and this tool can help you do that as well. So a great tool, a free tool to help you do some quick cleanup, and I'm going to talk about this one in a minute here. Revcloud Remover is sort of an archaic tool that might disappear from our tool set eventually. It just lets you delete revision clouds. With the new Advent 2018 Plus, you can actually delete the revision as a whole on project delivery, so you might not need the ability to delete just the clouds. Some people like to still just delete the clouds and keep the revision history in the model. This tool helps you do that. This was primarily built for contractors during end-of-life deliverables of a project. It's free. You can get it. You can use it if you want to. Ignore it if you don't want to. Okay, another great project cleanup tool is DIM Checker. This tool allows you the ability to discover in the project where people are in dirty ways overriding the values of dimensions. I'll show an example of this a little later on. This is one, I hate to call you out, architects, but the MEP and structural teams really depend upon your dimensions, and I've seen some architects in some places do some pretty dirty overrides, and this tool helps you discover those as an MEP and structural engineer to see how reliable that model is and what conversations you might want to have. Contractors also, you can leverage this tool for sort of the same reason to check validity of a model. Now, architects probably should check this to make sure you're not delivering garbage models. So we'll definitely take a look at this. And by the way, I am right now demonstrating this tool set in 2018. It really doesn't matter what version I demonstrate this tool set from. I invariably get the question of, does it work in Name Your Revit version? So I'm going to let you know right now, this suite, and for that matter, all of our suites, work Revit 2017 through Revit 2021. It's one download, one install, auto applies to the latest 5 versions of Revit, and they fully function in the same way across all those versions. So if you've had that question in your mind about, does it work in my version of Revit? If you're 2017 through Revit 2021, the answer is yes. It works in all those versions with one installation. Makes your life real easy to install this. Next tool in line, Family Checker. This tool is a great way of just kind of getting a report card on your families, understanding how compliant they are with your standards or with a sort of a generic standard and specifically with your shared parameters. And you can kind of gauge yourself whether certain things in the family are valid for your company or not. It gives you the full report card, checks about 40 things in the families, and gives you some things you might want to check yourself, and kind of gives you a complies or doesn't comply sort of pass-fail type result on the families in your library. And it gives you sort of an idea of some things you might want to consider fixing in certain portions of your library. Family Processor is a tool set that lets you go through your families and do all those super tedious tasks of swapping out parameters and adding parameters and changing formulas and reorganizing, changing instance versus type, all those things, cleaning up materials, all that stuff that can take so much time, potentially hours on family cleanup, and this thing can do it in seconds. I will talk about and show you a little bit about this tool. This is one of the flagship tools in the Manager Suite because it can save so much time, and I'll give you some numbers behind the time it can save you in a minute here as well. Import and Link Manager, another great project cleanup tool. It lets you discover imports in your project, but not just discover them. It lets you fix them. It lets you convert them over to be a link. And so if you have like a DWG import or a DGN import, you can actually find it and fix it before it becomes an exploded DWG in your project. You can also know exactly where the views are that it's been imported into, if it was imported current view only, or if it was linked into the model. You know what work sets they're on. You can pin and place all the things that we need to do for imports and linked models. You can do with this tool and very easily manage that from one location. So a great project cleanup tool, especially for projects running slow. One of the first things I like to check is, are there a lot of imports? Schedule Parameter Resolver here kind of is a crossover tool. It kind of crosses over the project cleanup and the family cleanup. But I kind of tied in more with the family cleanup process. Because usually when I'm going through and fixing my family's library, I may need to go back and fix my schedules that those families appear in as well. And this tool helps you with that. That whole concept of parameter roulette, where you're like, you go into the project and you're trying to add a parameter to the schedule, and you see panel material, panel material, panel material, panel material 4 different times. Which one is it? I don't know. So you got to add all 4 and then remove the ones eventually that you don't like. And if you have that multiple times, man, that's just frustrating. This tool helps you laser focus on the parameter that is actually in your shared parameter file, fix your schedules accordingly, and then as you bring your families into compliance with a tool like Family Processor, when they get used in that project, they'll just work the way you want them to. So it's a great partner tool to your family cleanup process. Shared Parameter Manager is kind of the starting point for all that family stuff, by the way. The starting point for all of it. Because without a proper shared parameter file, singular for your firm, that's your data foundation for your families and for your schedules and for all your tags and your filtering and all the things, right? If your data foundation is shoddy, then you're not going to have a really good experience in Revit in the first place. And sometimes we end up with multiple shared parameter files and the same parameter in multiple files, and that just gets confusing. And it's, which one do I target, right? Well, this tool helps you come to that single shared parameter file standard, helps you understand what parameters are in multiple shared parameter files and merge them together into one cleanly and make some wise decisions about that. This is sort of your starting point with that family cleanup process. Then you can use it in the Family Processor and your Schedule Parameter Resolver, use it against your family checker, you know, all the things that you need to do for your family cleanups. The final tool in line here is Type Swapper. This is a really powerful tool, especially if somebody's been exploding drawings in your project, or especially if someone's been using transfer project standards and they brought in some stuff and you end up with duplicate model types. That's frustrating. It's tough to clean up. It's tedious. Yeah, you can do it by hand, but it's certainly not very fun. In collaboration with the Import Link Manager, if I suspect someone's exploded some DWGs, I will also instantly take a look at Type Swapper, know for sure, fix those extraneous text types, line styles, potentially dimension styles from old model standards that may have gotten brought in, fill patterns, all the things. Great model cleanup tool. So to kind of recap this, talking about the 2 major workflows of project cleanup and family library cleanup, there's sort of a collection of tools here. So project cleanup first. Project Cleaner is great. Helps you clean up the views out of your project. DIM Checker helps you discover potentially erroneous dimensions that you may need to go through and manually check for yourself and make some choices on or have conversations with your team members about. Import and Link Manager, fantastic tool here for being able to go through, clean up your imported content, fix any links, manage that stuff. And then finally here, Type Swapper is a great tool for cleaning up any of that extra stuff, standards that have got brought in. So those 4 tools together work really well for that project cleanup. And you might add in sort of that 5th tool here of Schedule Parameter Resolver for project cleanup if your schedules might be a little bit sideways, and you kind of bring them into alignment with your new shared parameter file. The family cleanup side, well, Shared Parameter Manager is absolutely your starting point for this, being able to bring your shared parameter file into a good standard. And I'm going to show you this tool because this one's super powerful in the family cleanup side. Family Processor is fantastic to go through and actually clean up your content. And you may want to run Family Checker first to actually understand just how out of compliance certain portions of your library are, and then run Family Processor. So those 2 tools kind of can play together well. After you've done your processing of your families, you may very well want to go and fix all the previews in those families as well. In fact, you may do that step first, maybe, because Family Processor can leverage this as well. But there's that free Family Preview Manager tool that lets you kind of fix those family previews. And then Family Processor can pick up on that if you're using a standardized view name for it. And then you can always have your families processed with those same exact previews over and over again as you run through the library. And then sort of the 5th tool there again, that's kind of a crossover tool, that Schedule Parameter Resolver, kind of talks to both processes, which is allowing you to fix schedules based on that fixed shared parameter file. And as you fix your families, then that little sort of trifecta of tools there makes everything all work happily together. Okay? I just rambled real quick through a bunch of tools. I want to show you some things because just looking at a screen and watching me talk is not all that much fun. So let's take a look at some of these tools and see how they can help you out. I want to start with that project cleanup, with that project cleaner tool, and just talk a little bit about how this might work on sort of my sample architectural project and how you might decide you want to leverage this in your firm depending on how you're using this. If you're a consulting engineer, you're going to get architects models, and you might use this slightly different than the architects might. If you're an architecture firm, you might want to clean up before you send things out of house or just in general. Your project starts getting slow, start looking for duplicated working views that people duplicated with detailing. This tool, Project Cleaner, can help you do a lot of that stuff. Now, there's an option in this tool that I want to talk about pretty much right away once it opens up here for me. There we go. If I go here into options, one of the things that I like to set is to take my view organization and have it organized by whether the view is on sheets or not, or they're used, right? If it's on sheets or if it's used, that's kind of the same thing, and then organized by type. Now, you can organize a lot of different ways, but this is my favorite way. For sheet organization, I usually start with all, and later on, maybe I show sheets that are empty or sheets that are used, but this can take a long time to scan. So I usually leave this all, especially in large projects. And then up here, I just focus on sheets and used up here. So ultimately, once I do that, on my Views tab here, if I expand out my views, you'll notice I have a list of all of my sheets. I can see the sheets that actually have views right here. And I can even expand this out and see what views are on these sheets if I'm really interested in that. But what I really care about here are views that are not on a sheet. You see, there's also this one here that says not directly on a sheet, but it has one or more dependent views that are on a sheet. So I can kind of isolate those views as well and know exactly which ones are master plans that actually have dependent views on sheets. So I can kind of isolate that. But the not on sheets, this one here, if I'm late in a project lifecycle, most of my views are probably already on sheets. And I'm going to really be pretty critical here about the views that are still remaining in my project. Like all these working sections, those sections, I've seen this expand out with sections for walls and building sections. And it's like a mile long of section 1, 2, 3, 75, 85, 95, 125, like all these different numbered views, right? And nobody ever goes back to those. So I'll just take that entire section collection and straight up delete them. Right? I can do that pretty easily here. I can grab all these renderings that are saved directly to my project, which balloons my file size unnecessarily, and I can delete those. And then I can talk to the team about, hey guys, let's save your images externally and link them back in. That's a lot lighter weight than rendering and saving directly to the project file. And I can take some of those floor plans that might exist inside of here that are like working views, not on sheets. And if I'm late in the project life cycle, I might just take them all. If I'm early enough in the life cycle, I might not take all of them. I might, leave some of these here that I know are probably going to make it onto a sheet eventually, right? But you can get as deep into this deletion or as shallow as you want, right? There's a lot of drafting views in here as well that are not on sheet. Well, there's only 2. My exit view I'm probably going to keep because that's the view that I'm on here. Mine's a drafting view, not a sheet. but I could delete anything that's actually not in use. Ceiling plans, area plans. Look at my list of 3D views. People just make 3D views willy-nilly all the time, right? A lot of trash that I don't necessarily need to keep. There might be a few that I may want to that are not going to be on sheets, like my export-specific views, my Navis exporting, and maybe my site export views. But other than that, most of this stuff is just garbage that's not going to really get used again, in my case. You may have different cases. You may have to be more careful than this. But this way I can at least understand like what's not being really used in my sheet set. And then ultimately I can click remove. And if I do click remove, this ran through and deleted from my project 106 views, which I probably didn't want to do. So I'm going to cancel this because I don't actually want to delete those. I'm going to use some of those views in my demo today. I'm going to cancel out. But you could certainly remove those views and it'll permanently delete those. You also have the ability here, if you want, to like delete all sheets. So if I'm sending a model out of house, if I'm an architecture firm, I'm sending a model out of house, the consulting engineer isn't going to use my sheets. They're not going to use my details. Why am I ballooning a file unnecessarily and sending them something that they're not going to use at all? And they're probably going to go through and do this on if they have the free tools, right? So I usually delete all my sheets before I send something out of house. And then I delete all views except for the floor plans that I know that they're probably going to need, that I want them to see. And that's it. That's all I leave in the model. And when you delete those views, man, a lot of your file size actually comes from all the annotation elements and the drafted elements that get brought in. That's a huge part of where the file size comes from. The actual model itself is rather small in Revit, honestly. And so you can drastically reduce file size. I've seen file sizes decrease by 90% by doing this and just keeping a few select floor plan and maybe ceiling plan views, because that's all they're going to use anyway. And if you're an MEP engineer, structural engineer, it's all you're going to use anyway. So why keep all that extra weight around? You can really clean up nicely. Now, let's be realistic. If you guys are on BIM 360 sharing live models, you're probably not going to get that detailed with your deletion, but you are going to be able to use this real easy to clean stuff up during production. Great way of using this free tool set. It's free, right? So that's the project cleaner tool there. The other part of this, and sometimes I do this as an MEP and structural and contractor, before I actually even delete the views out of the project if I receive them, is I use DIM Checker. DIM Checker here allows me the ability to get a quick report of anything in my model that's typical or see so-and-so, I can exclude that, but anything else that's overridden, where the actual value of the dimensions replaced with text, I want to find all that stuff in my model. This lets me find that. Now, my model happens to be an imperial feet and inches. I understand most of you're probably working in metric, and maybe that override stuff happens less frequently, or maybe it happens as much up here in Australia as it happens here in the US. But sometimes people get lazy and they don't want to actually coordinate the model. So instead of moving a wall 50 mil or whatever because they want to align it, they just override the dimension string, or they do something even worse, like put a period out there. And then you got to figure out what they actually did with that, right? So if I want to know what this is or where this is, I can actually tell this to show me the dimension in the project, and it'll zoom me to it. And if I want to, I can even select that dimension string out there. It'll select it, it'll highlight it, and now I can start to understand here that this dimension string has something overridden with a period. Now, if I look across this string, you might be able to tell this on your screen, maybe you can't. This dimension value right here is in blue, which means it's editable. My selection color in my version of Revit is red. This is blue, okay? Down here, this black piece of text, what's this? In fact, this is where this is. Now, you might not be able to correlate in your mind feet and inches to the metric equivalent, but you can probably tell here that 11 feet at this dimension and 5 feet at that same sort of physical visual dimension, that's obviously not, something's not right here. What somebody did at one point was they overrode the dimension with a period, and they put their own text string on top of here, which is a piece of opaque text, right? Now, on a printed document set, no one would ever know this until you get to building it and someone's like, hey, what's going on here? It's a squirrely. Now, maybe this never happens in your models. I don't know, but you might want to find out for sure. This dimension checker tool helps you discover that kind of trash in a model real quick and then make some decisions as to how you're going to handle it. Import Link Manager, great project cleanup tool as well. How many times are you trying to figure out where DWGs are in your project? In my case, I've got a whole bunch of DWGs. Some of them are links, which I could manage easily through the Insert Link Manager, but the imports, man, you can't find that very easily. This here lets me figure out exactly what they are, exactly what views they appear in, whether they're pinned or not, kind of what the path is that they came from. Obviously, I can kind of tell who the user was that brought this in because it's passed to their documents, right? So I can find some of this kind of stuff out real quick and I can handle it. This one here, this is in a view called working. This is also in a view called working. Now, if I'd have used that deletion process earlier and I'd have deleted the working views, these two would have been gone anyway. This one's actually in my existing floor plan. So in my case, I might want to just run through here and straight up delete these. I'm just going to remove them from the project out of those two working views. I don't care about those. They're working views. They can reduplicate in the future. They shouldn't be duplicating with detailing anyway for a working view. That's what they did with this one probably. But this now, if I want to fix this, I can do a swap and a reload from. And I can browse out to where that particular file happens to be. In this case, my CAD files, and that was my LL. Yeah, it's my lower level DWG. And as I do this, I can now tell this that I want to convert this from an import into a link. I've told it what the path is to that file. I want to make it a link. I can go through and change some of the other settings if I really care to. And then I can click OK. And it's going to convert that from an imported CAD file now into a link. Keeps it in place, keeps it in its exact same location. It's still pinned in place. It's in the same hosted view, but it now fixes it. Now this is a link. I could fix the other import here the same way. As a BIM manager, I don't have to go navigate around the model and try and discover where it is. And then once I discover it, delete it and then replace it for them, or just delete it and let them replace it. I can actually help them retain their work. This helps me out with that. I can also do stuff like with these Revit links down here. These are all Revit linked models. You might notice that none of these are pinned in place. As my production increases and I continue in the project, once I've got them positioned where I want them, I do not ever want a user accidentally moving them. So I like to pin all those models. In fact, I probably should pin these other DWGs up here as well. And I can just quickly trigger pin without having to right click, select all instances, pin in place. I can just do it right from here. Makes it super simple. I'm also noticing, what is this guy? This is the AS. AS is my architectural site model. So that's on the interior work set. That's kind of screwy. That doesn't belong there. I'm going to change the work set to be the site work set. And also, there's these DWGs up here. They're all on the interior work set as well. They're 3D imports, apparently, and they're on the interior work set. That's all wrong. That should be on the CAD link work set. So I can swap those things out directly from here and move on with my life. Right? I fixed my model really quickly. No pain. Use one tool, fix some of that garbage, and if I sync to central, it's probably going to make my model run a little bit faster now that I don't have imports in here. The other day, I found a model with somebody who had been duplicating with detailing so much they had like 80 instances of the same DWG, overall floor plan, 80 instances of that in their model. Their model was taking a long time to save. We actually really decreased their sync to central time by this one simple tool here. Further decreased it by using Project Cleaner, but that's another story. Well, we already talked about that story. The last tool in the project cleanup process here is the type swapper that I'm going to cover right here. This tool is wonderful if you think people have been exploding DWGs, right? I can use this text types swap. If my standard is in here and I've already approved some of these as my standard, I can visually quickly check and I can go, what the heck is this? This default project text. It came from someplace. 3/32 inch Arial narrow is the text type, and there's 6 instances someplace in my project. Now, frankly, I don't care where that's used. It's the wrong text type. It's not my standard. I'm just going to swap it out for my 3/32 inch Arial right away. 3/32 inch Arial, swap that out. There was 5 instances of that before. It's done the swap. There's now 11 instances of that one and 0 instances of this guy. And I can now just delete that text type out. It's a single purge of that one thing or a couple of things, laser focusing on what I want to get rid of. Line styles are kind of the same game. Right? I know that like PyRevit has a cool tool for deleting out the SiteWorks stuff down here. Well, I have a tool for that as well. Right? I just go down here and be like, oh, grab these guys and delete these. But I can do more than just the SiteWorks stuff. I've got a bunch of imported CAD stuff inside of here. Grid and Grid IDIN. There's no instances of it anymore. I've got like Anno and Anno Center. I don't know. There might be other things that I might want to get rid of, but I can delete those out really quickly. In some cases, if I do have instances of line work, I don't want to just hard rip it out. I want to fix it. This line weight 04 is an old standard of mine, and it's supposed to be this detail 04 up here. It's one of my approved line styles. So I want to swap that out for detail 04. That's going to go ahead and make 106 of that line style instance up here, and then the rest of these 3, I want to just get rid of those. And so again, real quick, I can rip through this and clean up my line styles. Now, some of these here are still hanging out that I might not have quote-unquote approved, but they might be built-in line styles, like thin lines. I don't actually want to use that. That belongs on, I think, detail 02, so I'm going to swap that guy out. But, I mean, you can quickly go through and fix this stuff real simply in your project. Fill patterns, materials, dim styles. duplicate families when people transfer project standards and you get those duplicate family types. This can run through and swap out for the one that's actually the main named one, and you can then purge that stuff out later. In fact, it'll actually delete the duplicates for you when you run that swap. So a real big time saver there, can save a lot of headache and a lot of time quickly. Takes that BIM management task of doing some of that model cleanup and those initial checks and really strips it down to way less of an issue. Okay, let's talk about that bigger issue, I think, even than project cleanup, which is the family library. A lot of times we're doing project cleanup because our family libraries might not be as clean as we'd like them to be. We're doing a lot of schedule fixing and a lot of individual one-off family fixing when someone downloads something from an outside library and we want to fix that up. Or maybe we just want to go through and like mass fix our entire library. How do we do that, right? It's troublesome. It's tedious. You want to change a parameter standard. You want to change a parameter name. It takes a while to do that. You got to delete the old one, make the new one. So let's go through that process of family cleanup. And that starts with the data foundation here, the shared parameters, using my shared parameter manager tool. With this, what I can do is I can go find my master shared parameter file here. I'm going to go find, I think it's this guy. I hope it's this one. I have a bunch of shared parameters. You can see kind of the problem of having more than one shared parameter file, right? It gets confusing as to which one's which and which one you're supposed to be using. I'm going to use this one real quick because I can do some quick filtration here on my main shared parameter file, looking for things like naming issues, where there might be mathematical characters and names. Maybe I don't like that. Maybe I want to only show naming issues, right? Let's just kind of see here if I go down to dimensions. Yeah, this guy right here, panel depth, panel width. There's no spaces. There's supposed to be spaces in here. So what I can do is select both of these at the same time and fix them in one step. Now I can fix them one at a time. I could double click on this, and out of the box you can't do this, but I can rename this parameter. One-off rename. I can change data types. If the data types are wrong, I can fix that. You can toggle whether or not something is visible, user modifiable, set a tooltip, all the things that once you've created a parameter, you can't change natively out of the box. Only way to fix it natively is to manually delete and then manually re-add. And if you've got a lot of parameters to fix, man, that's frustrating to have to manually delete and re-add a bunch of parameters. Remember what the names were, the data types. We also have this cool feature here. If I have more than one of the same style or a couple things that I want to fix in a similar way, I can do things like a find and replace. I can find panel and replace it with panel space, right? Preview my changes, and it goes, oh yeah, the old panel width becomes the new panel width and the new panel depth with a space. And I can apply that. Now, when I apply that, it is going to assign a new GUID to the parameter. That is important. That's why you have to delete and recreate the parameter, because Revit needs a new GUID. This will safely assign it a new GUID. See, if you did this manually in Revit, and you rename that parameter and then you used it in a certain family, and you have two families of the same GUID with different definitions brought into the same project, you will crash Revit. It becomes incredibly unstable, sometimes crash into the desktop with no option to save. And that's not good. That's why we need to safely edit this thing. This is kind of why the heading of that shared parameter file says do not edit manually. So I can safely do this. Yes, I want to do that, and it'll actually rename that parameter. And then I can come back and do something like, we'll find width and depth and replace that with a space, or 1 and 2 and put a space before it and whatever. You can do whatever you need to, but it actually fixes those parameters, right? That's one thing you can do, is identify potential naming issues and then quickly use our tools to either double click and modify the properties to rename something, or do a find and replace and then save yourself a ton of time. Okay, the next thing you can do, and even more powerful in my opinion, is the ability to compare two shared parameter files side by side, right? And then with that, you can say, show me duplicate parameters. Let me swap this out, because I've already done that with this file. Browse again. Let's go find, maybe it was this guy. There we go. Okay, so I use an older edition of that same shared parameter file that I hadn't previously saved in a previous demo. And you can see that with this duplicates list right here, there are some parameters that are exactly the same between the two files. In fact, I can only show those if I can isolate them if I want to. I have 3 construction parameters: frame type, panel 2, panel type. I've got some dimensional parameters here that are identical. That's good to know. You know what's even more important? Those that are unique between the two files. And actually, even before that, sometimes I care about those that are conflicts. They are the exact same name, but maybe the GUID and maybe the data type are different. That I want to know about. Now, if most of my library was based on these parameters over here to the right, and less of it was based on these, perhaps, maybe what I want to do is I want to delete these parameters out of here, and I want to keep those parameters from the right. So let's see how we can do this. I'm going to batch delete these parameters out of my real company shared parameter file. They're gone. They're gone for good here once I save. Oh, and there's an existing parameter here too. Let's delete that guy as well. Then what I can do is I can swap this out and say, show me unique. And again, only show me unique. I'm going to collapse the entire group tree here and simply grab the parameters that I want to actually add across and simply drag and drop them to their proper groups. So like I've got a bunch of identity data parameters here. Let's drag and drop all of these into identity data right there. Okay, they're no longer unique, so they unhighlight. My whole tree expands also, but I'm just going to recollapse that. Materials and finishes here. Yeah, those are all materials and finishes, and I want all of those to be in my materials and finishes group over here. And then I'm going to grab my other parameters here. Yep, those are all other, so they're going to all get dropped into other. I've got some phasing stuff here. Maybe I want to bring that across. Oh, let's grab this over here and bring phasing across. Right? This makes it super easy to combine my file. What was that? Construction? Host assembly? Sure. Let's drop that over here. And then if I uncheck this show only, right? Now I've got some parameters here that are, well, none of those are really unique. They're all actually duplicates. All of the parameters in this shared parameter file now exist over here in the same way. I've handled this. Now, maybe that wasn't my choice. Maybe I just wanted to know that there was properties or problems that I had to go handle. This can help me discover that really quickly. If I get a manufacturer shared parameter file, I want to see how different it is from mine. Maybe I want to absorb some of their parameters. I can simply copy them across into my shared parameter file and use them moving on in the future. Or maybe I don't want to use them, but I want to know what I have to swap, and I want to see what their conflicts are so I can know what I can directly swap, whatever. This gives me the power to do that really easily. And then, of course, I can save my shared parameter file and move on. I can make these changes in a matter of minutes instead of making these changes over the period of a couple hours. But then you might say, yeah, but Sean, you've just changed a bunch of parameters over here. I've got a bunch of families and schedules dependent on those parameters. How do I fix those? Now I got to spend weeks, months, maybe a year going through my library and refixing all that stuff. If I've got multiple versions of Revit, how do I maintain all this stuff, right? Well, that's where the next tool comes into line. So I'm not going to save this file here because I don't want to make the same mistake I did last time by editing that file again. The family processor is the next tool in line that you can use for this. I want to show you this in a little bit of detail here. I happen to know that this door is not my door. I checked this out earlier in my model, and I found out somebody brought this door in. In fact, this is door number 143. If I was to go down to my door schedule, just to kind of take a look at this door number 143, let's see here. Yeah, there's a lot of things in this door that are not quite up to my standard, and I can tell because they don't appear in my schedule correctly. Now, an end user might open up that door and struggle with it for a while. They might call me up and ask me to fix the door for them, and that's fantastic. I'm more than happy to do that, but that takes time. To do this manually, if I'm doing it one door at a time, now in this case, there's actually a whole bunch of these doors from whoever this manufacturer was that are really not my standard. Door whatever, swing, there's door upward, door bifold. All these are not my standard, and they made their way into my project. I want to fix them. Well, if they all came from the same source, this becomes real easy. I can investigate one door, spend my time once to discover what the problem is, and then write a rule set here with Family Processor to rip through all of my families and fix them all the same way. If I've just gone through and renamed a parameter or a series of parameters, I can go through Family Processor and say, take all these parameters that I renamed and swap them for these new parameter names. And here's my entire 4,000 family library. Do it to all of them, right? This is sort of that value that I was talking about. I had a client not too long back who sat a summer intern down, which I think that's what summer interns are for. And they made them open up each one of their families and look for these 25 parameters that may or may not exist in there and then swap them for the correct one. Now, this poor kid got through, like, I think it was 60 families approximately in a 30-hour work week. Well, that's a half hour per family, which is all well and good, but they literally had about 4,000 families in their library at that time. Now, you can do the maths on that. That's a full year or more of productivity of a person just sitting there opening up families and manually swapping. Well, I showed them Family Processor, and we ran this exact tool on their family library, and it did that exact same task in 2 hours. All 4,000 families, done. I was able to start with a shared parameter file that I knew to be good, and I could verify it with this tool, and then I ripped through the entire library with the family processor, and it actually cleaned up all of the things and more that they really wanted to clean up, but they didn't task this kid with. So let's take a look at what this can do. I can do things like automatically auditing my entire family library when I open up and save things forward. That's important, especially if you're upgrading. I can force units of measure. If you're downloading imperial unit families from US manufacturers and you want them in metric units, you can actually have a template metric family with all the metric units you want, structurally, mechanically, whatever, and have the units of measure matched between the two in one simple step so that it's always your units of measure. It's always in millimeters or centimeters. It's always in square meters. It's always in, kips or KPA or you name it. It can be whatever you want it to be. Sort parameters by name within groups. If you got older families and the parameters aren't sorted cleanly, or you've swapped parameters in the past and they didn't resort, this can forcibly sort parameters by name within each of their individual groups. One step sorts the parameters. Great way of cleaning up the navigation of your parameters. You can also do categorical changes. You can do some omni-class value setting. You can do some work plane or shared settings or room calculation point settings and turn them off or on or whatever you want to do here real quick in batch. If you're an MEP user, you can leverage these lookup tables to delete lookup tables and re-import lookup tables. Later on with the change parameters, you can actually swap in the formulas which lookup tables are supposed to be used. So you can really leverage this cleanly. From a materials point of view, there's always these trash materials that show up in your families when you edit them out of a project. One of my other suites lets me batch save a bunch of families out, and that's all well and good. But then I get all these garbage auto-risk materials that always show up. So what I like to do is select all these materials and get rid of the ones that I know that I'm not going to use. Actually, these are all ones I want to keep. That's I want to keep. Everything else I want to get rid of. So I can delete all these materials in one step. Now, I may want to add materials as well, and I can do that. Like, let's say I wanted to add a material like WD. I happen to know that I need this one, so I can add that material real quick. The values don't really matter right now. I can set them if I want to, but I can add a material real fast to my project by definition. When I load that into my project, if that material exists with the same name, it'll just use that definition in my project. So I don't have to worry about setting it up exactly right necessarily in the family all the time. You can also change materials. One of the things I like to discover, especially in architectural families, is where default materials are used a lot. So I take the red property and make it 0, the blue property and make it 0, and I leave it kind of this minty green color, and I set its transparency to 50. And if I see a green glassy looking material in a shaded view in my project, I know that that particular family needs, or in my family preview, for example, I know that family needs to have some work done to it to actually assign proper materials, either by parameter or making a choice in that family to make it a little bit better. So this way I can kind of identify that real quick instead of it all just being gray like most materials are by default. Helps me really kind of discover that real quick. Now this change parameters tab, this is the superpower tab really for this that most people are the most interested in. You have the ability to go through and delete things you know you need to get rid of. Like in this case, somebody made a panel material here as text. They grouped it in materials and finishes, but they made it a text parameter, and I want it to be a material parameter. So I'm going to delete that parameter myself. I can visually look through these lists, and maybe I look through the family first to kind of discover how these things were set up so that I know what I want to change. I can also add shared parameters. So now that I know that I deleted panel material, I know that I want that. I can quickly search my entire shared parameter file, find panel material. It's currently grouped in materials and finishes in my shared parameter file, and I can add that to the list. Now, in my case, if I'm making this my family, I also want copyright. Now, this is another thing that I didn't mention with the shared parameter manager, but it'll help you define all the default Revit groupings for parameters in your shared parameter file. And then if you group your parameters properly there and use that almost like a template, when you add parameters to a family through this tool, it'll understand that I want this text parameter in identity data. Normally, it would add it to the text group or to the other group. But here I want it to go to identity data, and it remembers that, and it sets it. You know what? I didn't point this out before, but panel material, when it got added, it actually looked in my family, and it said, hey, there was a parameter. It was a text parameter called panel material, and it had a value. I'm going to try and set that value back to this new parameter that you're adding. So you can sometimes retain a lot of your data, right? This is, by the way, why I added the material WD before, because I knew that this parameter was going to use that. You can, if you want to, add family parameters. And the family that I have open right now is actually sort of a template. I can see the parameters that exist, and I could choose to like add swing angle again to my family as a family parameter if I really wanted to, with a default value and a default grouping. I'm not going to do that here, but you could choose to do that. You can also replace with shared parameters. So I can replace family parameters or other people's shared parameters with my shared parameters. Now I want you to see this is the tab, the sub tab in this whole set that can save you those hours, where I save that one company almost a year of time. In this area here, if I go through and select a bunch of these parameters that I know that I want to work with, all of these guys here, I want to add them to my list below. If those parameters already existed in my SuperDoor parameters file right here, it'll find them and use them. Now, in some cases, maybe they don't already exist, and I may have to make some choices about that, or maybe these aren't parameters that I actually should be using in the first place. I could remove them from the list. But if they exist, in fact, if I use a different shared parameter file like this one, let me do this again here, because that's a more complete shared parameter file. Let's remove those and re-grab and re-add these guys to my list. Back here to the change parameters, right? I've set up all of my rules. I've gone through and done this. Now, by the way, I didn't mention this before, but you can save your settings. You can make this 100% repeatable over and over again if you need to, which is great. This means I can set up door rules or window rules or specific manufacturer rules, my entire library upgrade rules for the once-a-year upgrade, you name it. You can set these rules and you can do these processes to make this real easy and painless to change your mind on a standard. In a morning, you could go through the exercise of making a shared parameter file, modifying some of the things, running that against your library, potentially fixing your schedules. In a morning, you could go through thousands of pieces of content and make these corrections, where normally that would take a year to make a change on something like that in some cases, or months. And you don't have to live with these standards that you don't like. You can update them and fix them. This can save you so much time. Now, on the select families and begin, I can give it as many families as I want. And once again, I can save it as new names. I can resave even if nothing was needed. This is great for upgrading families because it does do a compact as well. You can save it to a new parent folder, so I could take a 2018 library or a 2017 library and upgrade it to the new version. I could be in 2021, upgrade all my old stuff to 2021, you name it. If you remember before when I was mentioning the Family Preview Manager, I can set previews in all my families before I even do this process. And if I make the view a certain name, like Preview or CTC Preview or your company's initials Preview or whatever, you can have that be the view that Family Processor will set, so it can open up, make all these corrections, reset that particular preview, save and close the family, and move on. You can very rapidly fix your entire library. A lot of things can be done here. In my case today, I'm not going to do a batch process. I'm just going to run this on my current family file real quick. And I told it over here to copy all units from a certain file, but I didn't tell it which file. So I needed to turn that off unless I was going to give it a file here. Let's try this again. It's going to give me a confirmation window saying, do all these things. When I say continue, it's going to rip through, do all the changes to this family. I use this sort of as a quick check to make sure that everything's happy. And then what I will usually do is run this against an entire library. In this case, it gave me 1 bit of information, processing, 46 successful things. It deleted all the stuff. It added the one material. It changed the value for that new panel material property to WD, set copyright, did all these things. I didn't tell it to do a lot of formula changes, but I could do that stuff as well. I could change type and instance properties. You can do whatever it is you need to do to get your library updated. Ultimately, when I commit these changes, this file here now will have all those things. Base plate now became threshold. It's organized alphabetically. All these, panel material here has WD as a real material property. My materials list is purged out. It's all nice, neat, and clean. My default material here is sort of this glassy green, right? All the things consistently done. Saves so much time. All right. I'm kind of out of time here for talking about any more tools. You can see there's a lot of power here in the CTC BIM Manager Suite. So how do you get it? How do you get your hands on it? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, we're doing this webinar in partnership with APAL there in Australia. If you jump up to their website here, which is apal.com.au right here, apal.com.au. On their products page, there's a CTC software product right there. That's my company. When you click their CTC software products, you can go directly here to learn about all of our Revit add-ins, and one of them is the BIM Manager Suite. Now, with that BIM Manager Suite, you can get that trial right from here. You can try it out. If you want more information, there's a brochure. There's more information all over their site about this stuff. You can see more about our other suites as well. But the BIM Manager Suite trial, if you want to try it out, right there. And a quick note about that trial, when you download that, that's the full installation. If you decide, hey, this is fantastic, and you talk to APAL and you buy some licenses, when you get the licenses, whether it be network licenses or standalone licenses, if that works better for you, your choice, when you get them and you get that in place, you don't have to reinstall anything. It is the tools. They just become permanently active for you. And I mentioned earlier, when you install this, these tools work on all 5 of the latest supported versions of Revit. This one trial will auto-apply to all 5 of them. You can very easily network deploy those tools. There's some documentation that talks about how to silently push this across your entire firm. Makes life real easy so that your IT group can help you push them out silently, license them silently. Everybody gets access. Well, the people that you intend for the BIM Manager Suite, actually, which isn't going to be everybody, but the BIM managers there, they can get access to these tools, and you can use them to really streamline a lot of the tedium that we all go through in the world of Revit and BIM management. Okay, so I've talked already about how to obtain. I want to thank you all for the time that you've given me today. We always appreciate when you show up, you interact with us, you give us some feedback, check out our tools. So thank you for that.